Hi guys, I'm Celeste Marchant and I'm honored to get to introduce Shin. So Shin is originally from Seoul, Korea, but grew up in Chicago. She has published many esteemed poetry collections, such as Unbearable Splendor, which received the Minnesota Book Award for Poetry in 2017, as well as Rough and Savage and Skirtful of Black, which received the Asian American Literary Award for Poetry. Her work is expansive yet personal and orbits her own experience of transracial adoption. Having read Unbearable Splendor, I am blown away by her exceptional, unconventional ideas and cerebral writing, as was the literary community. Additionally, she is the co-editor of the anthology Outsiders Within, writing on transracial adoption, and she's also the author of the Korean and English illustrated children's book, Cooper's Lesson. She lives in Minneapolis and has taught writing at the University of Minnesota, St. Catherine University, and the Loft Literary Center. Here today to read from her work, I present to you the one-of-a-kind author, editor, and poet, Shin.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Celeste and John, for inviting me and everyone for coming together for poetry. This has been a very difficult, past week, for Korean American women and Asian American women and Americans in general. And yeah, it's just good to be with good-spirited folks. I think that poetry and literature, brings us together and can humanize us. And also poetry can remind us to slow down and see things in a different way, listen differently, embody things differently. So I'm going to read from my most recent book, Unbearable Splendor. And there's a labyrinth and kind of a bowl shape on the cover because the Minotaur is one of the figures in the book, which is a little bit, it's got some sci-fi and it's got myth and a lot of different things. So the first poem I'm going to read is titled Like a Second Person Inside Us. And Antigone is a character and Oedipus is a character. It's also about our skeleton. Like a second person inside us. Gorgon, guardian, weapon. Our armor like a second person outside us. Now eyes in the end breakable, a bouldering heart, a cave like a sister inside her. Eat the whip, the privilege. Our bones like a second person inside us, caves and brides, this unblooded bed, Antigone and her irreplaceable blank. Unburied, the broken king, a father with scars, at the ankles like buttons, abiding his skin, his prophecy like an unborn child inside us. A gallery, Atlas, judge of the dead, we are on the stage, we are at the altar. Shade mother bound in beeswax to mechanical father, the sport of sword falling, ocean's trenches swallow to ravish. Sheet of sun gold, hammered above, behind you, lonely oracle, the Minotaur's roaring heart. Between dynasty and doors in the universe, porches of the spirit, the nest we pluck from the hedge like a dried flower. Fireflies candling, the jar a glass bead, an eye a liquid room swimming inside us, an urn of watery light to drink and drink. Our bones like a cabinet locked narrow inside us, organs of the secret life, campfire ash or rebellion of moths. Powder and pollen, my baby turning to chalk, a starry crown of bees, bits of hive and honey in the wind. The body a sweet factory, a pyre. Our bones will harbor a fire like the second person inside us, an unfixed form of mixed. A tempest brings all orphans home, follow the dark veins and plumes of planetary skin. The weighted grains of the flightless, our bones felted and feathered like a second person inside us, 100,000 eyes. Glass the horizon like a captain, these paper woods all a tumble, each trunk a curved boat of time. Your mind no more than a mushroom, a burrow, branch, floating motes make a wedding dress white inside us. From stars callous, to receive now a gorgeous garment, a robe, and a family, to wear it on our backs, mantle of atoms. Our bones evolving, step by step, a more specialized person inside us, our very own Darwin, beak and seeds. It won't be long now. This combustion dwindles, hurries to adapt before the next glacial age, ice birthing and calving a frozen ocean inside us. Before the long night of dreams in reverse, inside out, in the invisible orchestra. Thank you. For some reason, even though John Persley has been the best organizer ever, I thought I had 10 minutes, but I can read a little bit longer than that, or I will, to fulfill my obligations. And it's a wonderful opportunity. So with that, I think I'll get to read, a lot of the pieces in this book are long and are kind of hybrid or just straight up prose. And the first poem that I read is kind of one of the more poemy poems, like it is more attentive to rhythm and line breaks and those kinds of poemy things. The first poem in the book is kind of a poem memoir thing, and it's got some pictures in it, and I will show those. And it's, longish, but has a lot of white space too. So the two main epigraphs for the book, and also that are right before this piece, I will read. The first one is from A Cyborg Manifesto by Donna Haraway. And then the second one is from Blade Runner from the character Roy Batty, who was a Nexus 6 replicant. First quote. The cyborg is resolutely committed to partiality, irony, intimacy, and perversity. It is oppositional, utopian, and completely without innocence. Unlike the hopes of Frankenstein's monster, the cyborg does not expect its father to save it through a restoration of the garden. The cyborg would not recognize the Garden of Eden. It is not made of mud and cannot dream of returning to dust. The main trouble with cyborgs, of course, is that they are the illegitimate offspring. And the second quote from Blade Runner. I've seen things you people wouldn't believe. So I'm a transnational, transracial adoptee, and a lot of my work is about exploring all the various threads that come together around reproduction, reproductive technologies, whether they be political or scientific, around the Asian American female subject in the United States, the immigrant, the migrant, how we are configured, described, represented, received, treated, and trying to understand the kinds of violence and erasure that we experience. And you know, the cyborg is a form, a really capacious, expansive form that speaks to me as an adoptee, as someone who was raised by strangers in a country across the planet, and was subject to assimilation attempts. So one of the things that I'm interested in in terms of robotics and I guess cybernetics or you know, androids is the programmability of affection. You know, how human can we make a machine? How human do we want to make a machine? So often in Hollywood representations of androids, you know, they are superior in strength, in computer processing speed, memory, you know, efficiency, skill level, skill acquisition, languages, all these things that would take a human years and years and decades, if, you know, to accomplish, if they could at all. And yet often the android is trying to become more human. I think that trope has changed though in our time, but I'm still thinking about it. And to me, kind of the labor of childhood is, you know, the parents or the elders, you know, inculcating this new person into the society and kind of programming affection. So for the adoptee, the orphan, the foster child, the person who comes as a guest, a stranger, or, you know, a gift, a burden, all kinds of things into this other family, how is it a microcosm of how that country treats immigrants, wanderers, border dwellers? So this whole book was really about, for me, the politics of hospitality, and then, you know, these different things that Donna Haraway mentions in A Cyborg Manifesto, you know, partiality, irony, intimacy, perversity, oppositionality, utopianism, innocence or the lack thereof it, dreams, and being illegitimate, you know. And so much of the rhetoric always in a nation state, and especially one that is a dominant empire like the United States, the discourse and the actions of who belongs, who doesn't belong, who's worthy, who's unworthy, who is disposable, and who is to be saved and treasured, is always at play in our daily lives. So I'm going to read this poem. Bear with me. It's called Valley, Uncanny. And there's two epigraphs in front of this poem. The first one is from NASA's website, the astrophysics page, focus areas, black holes. And it says, "Don't let the name fool you. A black hole is anything but empty space." And then the second quote is from Kim Hae-soon's poem called A Hole. She's a Korean poet. And that is, "Where's the hole's end?" A valley makes a kind of hole, a hole open on two sides. Korea, an island on three sides. South Korea, an island, water, 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 DMZ. North Korea, water, water, DMZ, the People's Republic of China. I was a hole and I brought it myself to Miguk, beautiful country, America, the United States. I carried a train of holes, holes of smoke, holes of sky, holes of water, holes of rice milk. I was an uncanny guest, 2 years old. A week after arrival from Korea, a brother, born in America, asked, "When is she going back?" Like the heavenly maiden with too many children to carry, too many holes to go back there, where, or there is a limit to canniness, but not to being uncanny. It is infinite, Muhan. So then here's the Uncanny Valley in English and in Korean. And there's notes in the back of the book on the Japanese roboticist who came up with this valley. And it's probably backwards. But the main idea is that the closer something is to human likeness, but it's not quite, the more disturbing and repulsive it is. So, and whether it's moving or whether it's still are also, part of the equation. So you could think of a teddy bear, stuffed animal, and how cute that is and appealing versus like a taxidermied actual bear, giving that to a child, right? They're both bears, but there's a big difference in how lovable they are and how disturbing they are. So if it's too close to real life, we find it disturbing. To many immigrants, exiles, and pseudo-exiles, back, as in go back to where you came from, becomes a manifold, space and time, an asymmetrical movement. A hole surrounded by light that pours in and down like Niagara Falls. In my boat is my nameless 2-year-old self and my nameless adult self. We approach the water. The air around us glitters. When my past self reaches out, sorry, that's my dog. Sorry about that. What noises? When my past self reaches out to touch the rushing white wall, like a dress she is wearing, I mimic her gesture. Maybe I am a kind of star, burning, sending you light to read by. A valley you might come upon gradually, not a hole to fall into. When are we all going back? There is no back, there is no there. Like the travel of light upon arrival, the star may be dead. Time can be fragile, it can be a blossom, and when you peel away the petals, that hard, dark face remains. Quote, another quote from NASA, most famously, black holes were predicted by Einstein's theory of general relativity, which showed that when a massive star dies, it leaves behind a small, dense remnant core, unquote. I lost my name and I stepped onto this corner, this half frame, the axis. It was empty in that moment, white space cousin to the black hole. I had my face, my feet, my duration in time. So there's just axis. One small step onto vertical Y and horizontal X at the crossroads between familiarity and human likeness. I could keep walking into this space, eating this time and drawing it into me like a thread through the hole of a needle. I could stitch it to me. The positive rising into infinity, an arrow on which familiarity travels without limits, rope to heaven, fraying, frayed. The negative descending not into infinity, but into dusk, oblivion, the nihilism of Freud's unheimlich, which means unhomelike. We have always known, we humans, about holes. It's another NASA quote. Although the term black hole was not coined until 1967 by Princeton physicist John Wheeler, the idea of an object in space so massive and dense that light could not escape it has been around for centuries. The opposite of what is familiar is infinite possibilities of startling encounters, one after another after another. How much of one's life can one spend in the approach? There is not always a name for what is unheimlich. Two lines, each like one train track, travel through space to plunge into the valley, moving still. So it's just lines, moving and still. And then there's kind of a stair of groupings, stairway, descent. Contract, heaven, paradise, human likeness. Moment, lapse, error, mistake. Incident, accident, event, episode. Emergency, crisis, disaster, catastrophe. Dystopia, apocalypse, time, expand. There is a code for every kind of duration. One must be careful to carry the right holes on one's journey. Forth, back, X, Y, toward the familiar. The bottom of the valley is the palm of time. There one finds rest. All objects fall at the same rate. No outside, no inside. I spent 16 years living with American parents. They are inside me now. They are my guests. They are my holes, like babies, like stones. I have 1,000 valleys inside me, descent upon descent. The swallowed becomes the swallower. Egg, star, event, time, whole, black, bound, devour, collapse. Reaching for, and then here's the last quote, and then the last line of the poem, but another NASA quote. However, as the star collapses, a strange thing occurs. As the surface of the star nears an imaginary surface called the event horizon, time on the star slows relative to the time kept by observers far away. When the surface reaches the event horizon, time stands still, and the star can collapse no more. It is a frozen, collapsing object. There is no end. So that is spread out at the bottom like that. And thank you so much for this time. I know my publisher would be delighted, if I sold any books. So if you feel inclined, you can go anywhere to find my books. But just thank you so much for having me and for gathering for literature and all these voices. I really appreciate it. Thank you.